very first thing, right, we get straight into the 5 most common mistakes that people will make in their training or whatever else. It's just, again, from a lot of years doing it now at this point, just what I've seen over the years that people are still doing, right? So the very first thing what I see is, and something to avoid, again, if you're just starting out or if you're doing it at the moment, is sacrificing technique for either doing more reps or lifting more weight. So what I mean by that is, a very common thing that you might see in the gym are, look, lads in particular, but I'm sure some ladies do it as well. So they might have, for example, these are 2 exercises that they sacrifice their technique for it. And one might be if they're doing bicep curls. So what I mean by sacrificing technique is, your exercise might be like this. You might have soft knees, stand up nice and straight, and you're curling the arms. But the concept is either on they want to get more reps and they start fatiguing, or they want to get more weight, so they sacrifice their technique, and it often ends up like this, and you're swinging it like you're something Father Ted episode, and you're just, the hips are going forward and the arms are coming up. But what you're doing is you're bypassing your technique or the gains you're going to make. So what's lifting this is the momentum of your hips, like a kettlebell swing almost, and your elbows are coming forward, and the dumbbells are being carried by momentum, not by the isolation of the biceps. So that's a typical example, but also what you're going to do is, because you're arching your back like this, you can end up pulling your back, and I have seen it. I've seen guys that just won't listen and they end up injuring themselves. That's the first thing. The second most common exercise that people do as part of, this is our first mistake that people make, is sacrificing technique, is in a deadlift, right? So lads will come along and they'll strap on their weightlifting belts, and they're competitively lifting now at this, or at least they think they are. And what happens is they'll put on the belt, and so your normal deadlift technique might be pushing your hips back, bars out in front, and up you come like this. So a normal lift, right? What'll happen is they'll strap on the belt, they'll lift super heavy, and then what happens is they'll go down, they might start off in a good position, and then they'll come up like this, and they'll round out their back straight up with the plate, drop all the plates and that kind of thing. So first of all, unless you're a seriously competitive lifter, there should be no reason to be wearing a weightlifting belt, because you're taking the focus off strengthening your back by relying on this thing. But plus, if you're going to sacrifice your technique to the point of you're wearing a belt to try and correct, the belt won't correct you. Like, if your back is rounded out, it's going to stay rounded out. But what will happen is you're going to pull your back. And again, I've seen it happen in the past where guys are just lifting too heavy and sacrificing that technique. So regardless of how heavy you lift, heavy to you might be light to somebody else, but don't sacrifice technique for more weight or more reps. Okay, so that's the first mistake a lot of people make when they're doing their training. The second thing then is not warming up, and I can't stress this enough, right? So any of our home workouts, I'm telling you to do your warm-ups beforehand. But especially if you're going in to do a strength session or any kind of weights or that kind of thing, often people will just, and I see it all the time, people just walk in off the street, no warm-up done, they go straight down the back and start lifting weights. Like, our muscles become elastic when they're heated up. So if we just go in and we start, lifting weights, or you're putting all this pressure, all this tension onto tissues in the body that haven't been warmed up, and you're more inclined to pull something and injure yourself. And you'll see a lot of guys that get injuries in their shoulders or injuries across their chest, in the rotator cuffs especially, because they're not warmed up, they're not doing the work for it. But then the real mistake that people make then is what you call static stretching. So static stretching is basically when say for example, I'm stretching my chest muscle here, so I'll have my hand here, I'll stretch out, and I'll just hold this stretch. So this is static because I'm not going anywhere. Dynamic is where you're kind of moving the arms. So the difference is, if you can imagine, right, if your muscles aren't elastic and they're not ready for all the work, and you're just starting to, like, when you contract muscles, they overlap each other like this, right? So if you haven't done any warm-up exercise, your muscles are in this position. So basically you're telling the muscle now, is right, I'm going to stretch you cold without it getting elastic. You're just going to stretch it cold, and you're more inclined to tear that muscle in by not stretching it properly, right? So it's super important not to go into exercises or not to static stretch before you work out. Do your warm-ups, then do some dynamic stretching, shoulder mobility, hip mobility, all these kind of things is for a different video, but don't go into static stretching, okay? The third thing is focusing purely on cardio and not on strength for fat loss, right? So a lot of people will think that, oh God, I need to lose weight, so they go out running and they won't do any strength because they don't want to put on weight or they don't want to get bulky. And I've done countless videos on muscle being more dense, offsetting the fat loss in terms of the scales. But your longer term gains come from strength training. It's your strength training that builds the lean muscle, and lean muscle requires a lot of calories to get and to keep. So you have a much higher metabolism by building lean muscle and by being, and I talk lean muscle, not talk about being a Hulk or anything like that. I'm just talking about being strong and having more definition and being toned, you know, something that everybody looks for. So the more that you have, the more calories you burn. So strength will have a much better long-term effect in terms of getting you lean than cardio will. So you want whole body workouts that'll give you that cardio effect, but still working on a lot of the strength work, a lot of the muscle exercises, okay? So don't just go off focusing on running or walking to shift weight, get into the strength side of it, do some of the home workouts, because that is strength work, it's body weight work. You'll still be working the conditioning of the muscles in your legs and your arms and chest and stuff. So that's the third thing. The fourth thing is a lot of people can come in with the idea of spot reduction. So, you know, they can say, oh, look, I just want to give me some exercises to shift my midsection, give me some exercises to tone up the back of my arms. Like, men really have two places they store it, around the gut, love handles maybe, and the chest, right? That's where they really store it. Women can store it, midsection is the most common, back of the arms, the bingo wings that nobody likes to look at, and then other women then can carry more around the hips and the thighs and that kind of thing. So it's not about, you can't, where the body stores the most fat is where it's going to keep it the most, right? So people store in different places because that's just the body's reaction. People react differently to fat storage, but where it's storing it is the last place it's going to shift, because it's storing it there for a reason. Like, if you give the body too much energy, too much, that's its reserves. So it'll shift it from everywhere else first, and you'll often see it that if you're trying to shift it from the midsection, you might feel it on your legs first, you might feel it in your arms, your chest, and this is the last place to go. It's because that's where the body wants to store it, and it's the last place it wants to shift it from, unfortunately. So you can't spot reduce any of these places. You have to whole body workouts, creating a calorie deficit, and the body will reduce it where it needs to reduce it first, and eventually it'll shift it. But don't get frustrated by, if you're still seeing inch loss or body fat loss overall, perfect, it will come off. Just don't get frustrated by it. And people make that mistake, expecting it to shift all from the midsection, and when it doesn't, then you get annoyed, you get frustrated, and you just give up on your plan, and then nothing happens for you, and you're just in this vicious circle. So don't get frustrated by that. So the fifth thing then, and the last point, is one of the other mistakes that people make is either overtraining or being too strict on themselves in diet. So when people start off on an exercise routine, they feel like they either have to do 5-6 days a week, 7 days a week, every single day have to do something because they need to get the weight off. They give themselves no time for recovery. And ultimately what happens is two things. You'll either get injured or you'll burn out and you just can't sustain it. Like, you're gone from 0 to hero in no time, because okay, I have, you know, some people might have more time in their hands now, some people don't. But some people feel like, okay, I'm going to train 7 days a week, even when they're back in a routine. I'm going to train 7 days a week, I'm going to get the weight off. But you're gone from doing nothing for 10 years to 5, 6, 7 days a week. You just can't sustain it. It's going to be too hard. You're going to feel like, I can't keep up with this, there's too much going on, and it feels like too much pressure, and you don't enjoy it. So you give up, and again, you're back in this vicious circle. But the same goes for your food. So people start out, goes, okay, I'm going on a diet, I hate that word diet, but I'm going on a diet, and I'm going to cut out carbs, and I'm going to cut out fat, and I'm going to cut out whatever else, and I'm going to be super, super strict. And again, you can't keep that up either, because you've gone from maybe eating crap for the last 10 years, or not even the best diet you could, or the best food plan you could, and now you're going into training all the time, and you're going into eating really well. But it's not something you've been doing for long. So give yourself time. Like, it's not, you're not going to undo bad habits for the last couple of years in a couple of days. So give yourself time. Don't be so strict on yourself in terms of the amount of training you're doing in the week. Don't be so strict on yourself in terms of the amount of, or how well you're eating, or being super strict, cutting out all the good stuff. You won't keep it up for the rest of your life. And if you can't keep it up for the rest of your life, why do it now? It'll only frustrate you. So it's all about balance, really. Okay. So look, there are 5 things that I see over the last, as I said, 11 years, coming on 12. I've just seen in the industry. So just to help you kind of understand that these are things you can avoid and just create a better balance for yourself, so you'll create long-term results that you can keep off for the rest of your life. Okay.